Hi.
Hi.
My
Leslie,
I don't know why my volume was up so loud. It like just shocked me. My gosh. Hi.
was my voice shocking?
No, because like when you go in and it's already recording, so like right away the lady's all, videos
Yeah.
recording and it just
Yeah, yeah.
boom in my ear. I was like, ah.
Too funny. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm
Sorry for
good.
the shock this morning.
I was walking my dog and I'm like, "Oh shit, what time is it?"
No, it was totally me. Like, and it's so
Oh my
funny
God.
because I know I put in the message, I was like, yeah, I'll be 7 Mountain Standard Time, 7
Right.
a.m. And I even asked my mom and my sister, I was like, I was like, if it's 8 o'clock in California, it's 7 here, right? And everybody's like, yeah, yeah. I'm like, all right, cool, we're good. But no, it's 9 o'clock here when it's 8 o'clock there. So I was all over the place. So my bad,
It's
my bad.
that time zone math is a bitch,
Dude,
man. It's
you,
like
you would think after so many years of having to deal with time zones, I would know something by now, but
me
no.
too. No, forget it. Oh, and I went to Vegas recently. So
Yeah?
I flew from Florida to Minnesota to Vegas. So I was
Oh,
in like
fun.
three different time zones. Yeah.
Oh,
Actually,
that's messy.
it's so messy. I went out for the taco party and also to record. I recorded a bonus I haven't
You
shared with any. I
did.
finally got in
Awesome.
studio and had that whole magical moment of recording a bonus track. I couldn't do like a full demo, like a
Sure.
full, but I did a radio imaging bonus. So I'm really excited. So
Ooh, I bet that turned out really good.
yeah, so I'm
How
I'm excited. So
exciting.
speaking of time zones, in like one day, I was in three time zones.
In
Yeah,
one day.
yeah, in one day. Yeah, it
Oh,
was
that's
interesting.
kind of
So
sickening, actually.
yeah, it took me a minute. It took me 3 days to get back when I got home too, because I went through three different time zones again. So it was
Oh my
like
God.
a little bit weird. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. Oh man. I'm
I
I'm
also
excited to hear that bonus though.
I know. Thank you. I also have some before our guest gets here. I have some interesting, cool stuff, voiceover stuff. I finally had the cool thing to check off my list that like I booked a job through
Uh-huh.
TVAS's auditions that they sent
Ooh,
out
yes.
for a casino video game. I got
Rock
one of the bit
on.
parts
Yes.
and on top of that, which I was like, I will take that all day long. If I don't win the monthly contest, that's fine. If I can win, score an audition and get
Heck yeah.
paid,
Heck yeah.
yes. And I was a little bit surprised though, like, anyways, I was surprised because they're like, you don't have to do anything. This is what I was
Okay.
surprised about. We loved your audition. Where do we send the check? I'm
Oh,
like,
I love it.
never had that happen before.
That's
It's on my sticky note.
fantastic.
So I was like,
Congratulations. That's
yeah,
awesome. That is so
thank
freaking
you.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yay.
I couldn't wait to share with you because I was like, that was so
That is
fun.
so cool. I
That
love
just
it. I
happened.
love
Yeah.
it. And they talk about that all the time, that magical moment where you send the audition and somebody's just like, okay, and where do we send the check?
Yeah.
No, no revisions. I love it.
I know. It was the Viking one, the Viking gal.
Yeah,
So
I
I
seen that. I seen that one, but I was like,
yes.
that's not my fit.
That's not you.
I'm not gonna try that one.
Yeah, that was definitely all me. I could
Oh, how
definitely do that.
exciting. I'm excited to hear that one.
Yeah, it was fun because when you go to Vegas, it's a casino game. You're like, where is it? I want to find it, but it's like
Yeah.
a sea of casino games, so
Yeah, yeah,
I would
yeah,
never be
yeah.
able to find it. But let's talk about our guest. I'm happy that you're here. Kate Volman. This is pretty exciting because she's an author. I was reading,
Uh-huh.
she's an author, she's a multi-passionate leader, fitness enthusiast. She's totally up my alley. Podcaster, content creator, book lover, and author. And she wrote a brand new book that just came out in March.
Hmm.
So I met her media contact at Podfest
Okay.
and she connected us. I made a lot
Okay.
of cool connections at Podfest. So
Right.
and she thought that Kate and I would connect. I think we will. She wrote a book about do what you love, which is what we're
Mhm.
all about. That's why we're in voiceover and on camera, right?
Right, 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 right.
So, and she's a podcaster, so I was listening to several of her podcasts. She's got two podcasts,
Oh,
which
really?
yeah, I don't know. The other one's more business minded, so we'll have to talk to her a little bit
Oh,
about
okay.
that. But this podcast is it's I think it's like create for no reason,
Uh-huh.
which I love because she talks
Yeah.
about passion projects and we're all about being creatives, you know?
Hmm. Hmm. Yep.
So, did you get a chance to listen to some of her podcasts?
I did, and honestly, it's probably gonna be one of my new favorites, honestly.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
yay!
Yeah, I listened to a couple of episodes and I was like, this is what I need. Like I needed that kind of inspiration, that kind of like, just get in the chair and do it kind of deal. And I've
Yeah.
been kind of searching for something like that for a while, and that one really resonated with me from the very first podcast that I even listened to. I was like, dang. This is what
Yeah.
I'm looking for.
Yeah, and she gives you short little pieces of information too. They're not long and drawn out. It's really
Right.
conversational. I'm like, "Oh my gosh,"
Mhm.
taking notes on how she's relaying information so conversationally, but you can tell that she's really connected and passionate about the subject, which they always
Y
talk about that in voiceover.
Yeah, and you know what? It's funny because like, I was listening to, like, the very first time I heard her on her podcast, I was like, "Does she have a past in, like, radio or, like, hosting or something?" Because she is a really good host, like, she's just really bubbly and, like, straightforward and into it, and I'm like, "I wonder what her past is," but, obviously, I always wanna connect everything to radio, so
I know, right? I know. I
but yeah,
know.
really awesome stuff.
Radio's in our blood.
It is, totally.
I mean,
If we
ugh.
want it or not.
Oh my god, right? Oh my god. Well, it really connected with me in one of her episodes. She was talking about passion. I hope we can talk a little bit about this, about passion projects, because when you start a podcast,
Mhm.
it's you're passionate about whatever subject you're choosing to talk about. And when I started Keeping Up with Chaos, I told you before, we've merged the two podcasts together, From the Booth and Beyond and
Right.
Keep Up with Chaos. When something starts, you just get it started. You're not really sure where it's going to go,
Mhm.
and then as you get into it and you are enjoying it, things evolve and change, and it's like you try to figure out, like, well, where is this going, like, this
Right.
is a passion project. Is time and energy and money,
Mhm.
and where is this going? And
Mhm.
and she had some really neat things to talk about, that because a lot of people have passion projects but they never start them
Right.
because they're like, what's the point, where's it going to
Right.
go? But sometimes you
Mhm.
just have to do it and
Yeah,
see where it takes you. And
absolutely.
here it's taken me to start to merge 2 podcasts together that are 2 amazing podcasts that have merged into I think is a pretty cool one
It
podcast.
is, absolutely. And
Sorry.
not to take away from your other one, like, you did
Yeah,
so much great work on, keeping up with chaos and, just finding your niche, for that particular, podcast, and then
yeah.
the cool thing about it is that you've seen an opportunity to, merge 2 together that would work really well, and now it's a whole new monster.
My god, it's so cool. I'm so it sounds so, like, cheesy and aging myself, but I'm like, "I'm tickled pink." Like, because I see, like, Gabby doing the artwork,
Mhm.
and it's just levels things up, and Frankie doing the behind the scenes with the show notes, so he's the writer and, he's the assistant, I guess, like, director or whatever, and you're, like, the assistant producer, and you're helping me produce everything, and so just
Mhm.
taking a little pieces of loads off of me, and delegating and
Right.
then creating like a team, it makes things just so much more fun. So
Yeah.
I'm enjoying it so much. Kate's here.
Hi, Miss Kate.
Welcome.
Hello.
How are
Finally,
you?
we meet you.
I know, I'm so excited.
I'm Jozlyn. So I'm the one that we've been emailing back and forth and trying to connect. And here's Angela. She's joining us
Hi,
this morning
great to meet
too.
you.
Hi, Angela. Nice to meet you. And
Yeah.
oh my gosh, you guys, this is such a fun show. And I love your voice. I don't think I realized at first that you were in voiceover until I heard one of your episodes and you were talking about it with one of your guests. And I was like, oh, and then I looked at your website. I was like, she's like a full-on voiceover
Yeah.
artist.
Yeah, all of us are. We just merged 2 podcasts together. We were just talking about that, about passion projects and how sometimes you just have to start it. And so many people don't start because they're like,
Yeah.
what's the point? And so I started
Mhm.
Keeping Up with Chaos. And then Angela and I started From the Booth and Beyond. And then we were like, where are we going with these things? And then we just decided to smush them together and make one big passion project.
I love it. I love it. I mean, that's the epitome of the creative process, right? I mean,
Right,
Mhm.
just doing it. Sometimes the idea that we had at the end is just unrecognizable.
right.
And it just
Totally.
turned into something so amazing and incredible that you never would have come up with had you not just started in the first place.
Absolutely,
Yes,
absolutely.
absolutely. Go ahead, Angela. I know you had so many things. I know you had so many things.
No, I mean, I'm just excited to be here. We were just talking about your podcast and, about your book and things like that, and I was telling Joz, like, I've been searching for something to kinda give me, like, that push, that little drive for a
Mhm.
while. And you find things here and there, but I was like listening through a bunch of your episodes and I was just like, this is what I was looking for. This is exactly what I
Right.
needed, to hear these kind of thoughts and even just the energy of your podcast. I was telling her like, I wonder if she had like some kind of hosting experience in her background because she is so like vibrant with her guests and I just love it. And Jaws and I both have backgrounds in radio. So like the first thing that went to my head, I was like, she could be a radio jock.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. It's funny. I had a dream. I had a dream. That was that was one of my dreams many, many years ago. I thought when I was like in my 20s, I thought I wanted to be on the radio. I really thought that was going to be my
Yeah.
career path. And then I kind of reached out to a lot of the hosts, like the radio hosts, and I would go to the remotes that they had and try to meet them. And then the more that I learned about the business, I was like, wow, this seems like it's really intense having to go to all those remotes and doing all that kind of work. And but then I really thought I was going to do voiceover work.
Oh,
And
wow.
interesting.
I actually, this is how crazy it was. There was no voiceover classes that I could find in South Florida, like down. I thought there would be something in Miami. I couldn't find anything, but what I found was in Orlando. So for 6 weeks, I drove to Orlando, which
Oh my
I'm in West
gosh.
Palm Beach. So it's about, I don't know, about 3 hours. So I drove 3 hours to go to this voiceover workshop. And then I would drive home 3 hours the same day for
No.
6 weeks in a row, just so I could learn about how to become a voiceover artist.
Yeah.
And then I got a couple gigs and moved on to other things.
It's a lot of work. People don't
Yeah,
realize that you can't
it
just,
is.
get a microphone, create a booth and, just it's a lot of work. We train
Mhm.
in Las Vegas. So because of, the pandemic, we were able to do things virtually. So that makes things a lot easier, opens up a lot more doors.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're both so we both have taken on our creative passion and voiceover and gone full time, but a lot of people don't do that either. So
Mhm.
it sounds like you did it and you tried it and it's taken you but it took you down a different path, which is so interesting. So okay, how do people, when you're talking to creatives, like if they want to create, right? Like what's the difference between all of us? We took the step to create and get going, but there's those that don't. So like what would you say to other creatives that are out there going, I want to get into voiceover, I want to get into radio, and they don't take that step, right? To try to
Yeah.
create that initial step. Like,
I talk about, so in my book, I actually talk about this I called it the passion loop. We have this passion loop, and it's really when we come up with this idea like, oh, I want to explore being a voiceover artist. And that is something that you think, oh, you have that thought initially. And then you think, I want to try that. Like, I want to try that. That sounds really cool. I think I'm going to try it. But almost immediately what happens is I don't have time. I'm not talented enough, or there's already so many people doing it. It's really competitive. We give ourselves all of these. At the end of the day, what are they? They're excuses. So
Mhm.
now you have
yes.
this idea, you say you want to try it, and then you have excuses. And so it's this loop, because then what happens is after you decide, okay, the excuses took over, I'm not going to do it. What happens after a month? You think, you know what? I really want to explore that idea of becoming a voiceover artist. And then it goes back to the loop.
Again.
So the
Yeah.
way you break out of the passion loop is
Right.
exactly what you said. You take action. You do it anyway. You do it
Yes.
anyway. Even with the
Mhm.
excuses, you just try it. And
Yes.
that's all it is. And what's so beautiful, and we opened with that, which is you had this idea, you tried it, and it doesn't even matter what happens. Like the outcome is not even the point. The point is that you're just creating. And so what it does is it opens up your doors to new opportunities, new people, new passions. Like for me, I did it and I realized, oh, this actually isn't the path I want to go down, but it taught me so much about voice and communication. And then I started doing public speaking, and then I started doing all these other things. And then I got into podcasting. And so all of the things that we learn, if we look at it as these are all just collected moments and
Mhm.
experiences that help us become a better individual, a better person, a more creative person, when we actually lean into what interests us, we can't lose. We literally can't lose.
Right.
I
Absolutely.
love that. See, there
Absolutely.
you go. Public speaker. She was,
Yeah, there it
not
is. That's
necessarily
that's
there
what I
it
was
is.
looking for.
There it is. You got your answer.
I love that we're starting off with this because one of and I think it was the very first episode that I listened to, but you were talking about a quote that really just kind of changed your life, and it's do what makes you better. do the things that make you better. And, that right there, I was like, yeah, that's exactly what you should be thinking about. And as of right now, I do the voiceover stuff on the side, and I also tutor young children in reading. And just yesterday I was talking to this little girl, and she was talking about practicing at home, and practice makes perfect. And I was like, no, let's try practice makes progress
Oh, I
better.
like
I was
that.
trying to tell her, like perfect is a lot, like let's strive for progress. But after I heard that quote, do what makes you better, I'm like, oh, I got to take that to my little girl tomorrow. I got to tell her, do what makes you better, So like, I love that. I heard that. And then, we're kicking things off with this, strive to be the better self, the better person.
Yeah. I mean, think about how much pressure that takes off of people if
Yeah.
the goal is just to get better.
Mhm.
Every single day we just to get better, instead of I have to be this famous voiceover artist, or I have to have
Right.
this show, or I have to have this podcast that's going to be, number one on the charts. But that stifles our creativity because
Yes.
we put all this pressure, when instead we can say, I have an interest in starting a podcast. This is what I want it to be about. What would be your first 3 episodes? Who would be your guests? Do you want to have guests? Maybe you just want a podcast where you're talking and you're sharing your ideas. Whatever it is, there's a place for your ideas, but only if you're brave enough to share them.
Exactly. That's so
Definitely.
amazing. Like I also do group fitness, so I was doing group fitness on the side too. And you're a exercise enthusiast as well. So it's like the only difference between me and the other gal that was taking the same class, is that I just went and got educated. I went and got certified, and now I can teach. There's no difference. I'm not like some mega workout person. I just like to work out, and I happen to like go get certified, and I like to teach. And so like just doing it, is so important. I think that's kind of like the difference between me and some of the other people that started voiceover. When Angela and I took the first class together, the first 4 weekers, the difference between us is that we're just still doing it. We're just
Yeah.
making it happen. We're finding the time, even when we've got other things going on, which
Yes.
is my other point, was that how do you create your passion projects and turn them into full time, right? Or if you don't want to pull them into full time, like how do you create your passion projects when you have all this chaos and like day jobs and life? Because I have so many voiceover friends that have daytime jobs, and they're passionate about voiceover, but they're like, I can't do
I
it
can't
all.
live.
Yeah,
I can't live on that money
I can't.
right now.
I can't survive.
Let's be real.
That was like
Let's be
5
honest
questions
here.
in one. Sorry.
I know, but it's good. It's good.
We'll unpack it. We'll just unpack it all.
We'll unpack all of it, because I think the first thing is there's such a distinction between those two things. And
Yeah.
I think the first thing is to get really real with yourself.
Yeah.
Do you want it to be a business, or are you really just interested in exploring it? I think that's an important distinction, because I think in our world today, where we are so filled with information and we're so filled with messages that say you can turn your passion into a business, and it is totally available to you. If that is your dream, amazing, you can do it. But we also have to remember, is that what you want to do? Because if you want to do it, just like what you said, you have all the resources that you need to become a full-time voiceover artist, but it's a lot of work.
Oh my God.
And
Yeah.
I always tell people, my team teases me, because I always say to them, whenever they're like, yeah, we should just do this thing, I'm always like, everything is an iceberg. Everything is an iceberg, right? So if you think, I want to start this podcast and I want it to be my business, amazing. I have friends, they have multi-million-dollar businesses just through their podcast, which is amazing. They work harder than anyone that I know, because they're it's a business. And so I think that we hear all these messages of, oh, it's just really easy to do these things. Here's step 1, 2, and 3, and now I'm this multimillionaire, or it's my full-time business. It takes time, just like every single business. So if you want something, if you want to turn your passion into a business, amazing. That has to be a priority for you. That has to be a long-term play for you. You have to have a plan and get after it. And if it's really a priority in your life, then you're not going to make the excuse of, I don't have time, I can't figure it out, I can't do it all. We make time for the things that we really do say is the most important to us. And then on the other side, on the creative side, hey, it's okay. I have plenty of friends. In fact, I was just talking to one of my best girlfriends. She is amazing. She is killer at sales. She loves her corporate job. I mean, she's amazing at it. She's great at it, and she loves it. And they let her go and speak on stage. She published her first book 2 years ago. She's working on the next one. She is the most driven, dynamic individual. Actually, she'd be great to have on the show. I would love to
Yeah.
introduce you to her.
That'd
We'll
be
take
great.
that information. Thank you.
We talk about it all the time. Her name is Becca Powers, and she's amazing. So I'll introduce you, but she's so great because she and I have this conversation all the time because she has a full-time job and she loves it, and she gets to do that creative work. And that creative work may at some point turn into her full-time role, maybe, and she's working towards it. But while she's doing that, those are her focuses, and she has a family, and she has, like everybody, we have all the chaos in our lives. But when we are focused, we get rid of some of the chaos when we truly prioritize what we want. And if we say that something is important to us, then does your calendar reflect that? Like, are you truly making time for it? Look, there's plenty of creative dreams that I have that I have a dream of playing piano. I don't make time to play the piano because that's just not
right.
It's just not that important to me right now. Could I make time to do it? Yeah. But if I'm playing the piano, then I'm not writing my next book, or I'm not writing poetry, which those are more things that to me at this time in my life are more important. And so I prioritize those things. And so I think it's really important. We have to get really real with ourselves and also know and recognize that if you want to turn something into a business, amazing, wonderful, you have everything that you need, but it's going to take time and you're going to have to figure things out.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And you're going to have to just pour money into it. Just buckets of money into it, and training. And, you can't just like crack a mic open and, I mean, some people are probably that talented, but I mean, it takes training and time and you have to be, meticulous about, setting aside how much time you're training and money and all that kind of stuff. I think Angela's like, you're very methodical, Jozlyn. I'm like, I am very methodical, but, there's a rhyme to my reason. And setting those goals, keeps me going even when I'm having a shit ass day. It keeps you moving, because otherwise you're just gonna fall out. You're gonna fall out of it. Go ahead, Angela. I'm on a ramble rampage.
No, it's fine. It's funny that you say the whole methodical thing, and especially when Kate was speaking about, jumping into it and doing it. Like, that's a conversation we've had in our voiceover career is, for me, I really just kind of dived in, and it was sink or swim if I was here or not, and then, Jaws had a plan. She was like, I'm taking this course, and then I'm going to do this, and then we're going to do this. She had a plan versus me. I was just like, I'm here. I'm going to throw some money here. I'll throw some money there, and we're good. Let's try it, and it was, our paths were a little different, but we all kind of merged together, and we're at a point where we're both, making money, and we're doing some jobs here and there. And it's just funny. We took different paths, but the fact of the matter is that we stepped into it. We actually made it happen versus doesn't matter how we made it happen, but we stepped into it and we're here. So
And Angela, I love that you said this, because this is another thing where, because there's so many resources and books. I mean, think about it. There's all these entrepreneurs or people that have done so many impressive things in their life. And what happens is they get to kind of like the top. There's no top, right? They keep going, but they get to this certain level, and then they write a book and they say, this is how I did it. And then we want to read the book because we're like, tell us how to do it.
Right.
But what's so cool is the best books, they say, I didn't do anything the way that it was supposed to be done. I did it all my own way.
Totally.
I figured it out. Like Shoe Dog. Shoe Dog is one of my favorite books, right? Like talk about the story of Nike. So fast. It's the best book ever. And he talks about navigating. He talks about when he met his wife, and he's talking about the whole journey of Nike. And it's fascinating because every one of those books, they're so much fun to read because they all had all of these ups and downs. And then I did this, and then I did that, and then I learned this, and then I met this person along the way. But your stories, your stories are both different, got to a similar place, but the underlying theme, you took action. You kept going.
Yeah.
You just like every day you showed up and you did the work. And that is again, going back to the creative process, that is the creative process. You show up and you do the work. That's it. And if all we do every day is to say, my job is to show up and do the work, you can control that. You can't control if someone's going to discover you. You can't control if someone's going to say you're good enough. You can't control any of those pieces, but you can control, I'm going to show up. I'm going to do the work. I'm going to get better. I'm going to learn. I'm going to grow. I'm going to reach out to people that I really want to talk to, connect with. And you have everything that you need to do that every day. Like that's a really wonderful way to wake up in life instead of, oh, I don't have the resources. I don't have the right connections.
Right.
No, you have,
Absolutely.
it's the whole stoic philosophy of there's things that you can control, there's things that you can't. But like if we focus on the things we can control, we actually have a lot more in our control than we usually believe that we have.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. Oh my
Mhm.
gosh. Wow. Go ahead, Angela. Go ahead.
I
I
was
have
just
like,
gonna ask, like, and like I said, when I was listening to your podcast, like I was like, this is what I needed. This is like listening to the stories and just the insight that you and your guests have on, either writing a book or doing just different things in life. Never had I once felt the need or felt the idea behind it as, do you have what it takes? Like a lot of motivational podcasts and stuff that I've
yeah,
found over the years is, do you have what it takes? And it's like just really aggressive, like a really aggressive
right.
idea that, you have to have this thing to be an entrepreneur or this thing to be a writer.
Mhm.
Your podcast is different in the sense that you kind of have more of like a friendly like mom push.
Yeah.
Aw.
I don't know if that's the right way to push it, but it's like, I believe in you kind of idea
Yeah, yeah. I'm
versus
proud
like,
of you.
yeah, versus like the drill sergeant kind of thing. And I love that about your podcast. Do you feel like the idea of do you have what it takes falls into your kind of line of inspiration?
Yeah. So in the book, I actually share 7 myths that stop people from
Yeah,
exploring their
I
passions.
want to talk
And
about that for sure.
there's a couple of them that kind of play into that. And one of them is myth number 3, which is you need permission. I think
Yeah.
so often we
Wow.
feel like we need permission to pursue something that is interesting to us. We're kind of waiting to be picked, right? We're
Yeah.
waiting
Right.
for someone to say, "Oh, Jozlyn, you're good. Like come try this." But no,
Right.
like people are not I mean, of course that happens, but it doesn't happen unless you're doing the work, unless you're continuing to move forward. So we have to wake up every day knowing, hey, I am good enough. Like
Yes.
exactly where I am, I am. And so when we start comparing ourselves to other people, or we start thinking, oh, I don't have the talent, the resources, that prohibits us from doing the work. And then if we're not doing the work, then we're not gaining the skills that we need in order to fulfill whatever our mission is. And then, of course, no one's going to pick us. So we have to choose ourselves. We have to say, yep,
I like that.
I give myself permission. I write my own permission slip to start the podcast, to take the dance class, to try something new, to
Right.
whatever it is that you want to explore that has, by the way, been in your heart for a reason. Like
Yes.
you have this creative pursuit. It's there. It's inside of you. It is not going to go anywhere because it's truly meant for you. Like
Yes.
it's literally there for a purpose and a reason. And we can maybe silence it a little bit, but it's still in the back, kind of like, hey, remember
Yeah.
me?
Mhm.
Like,
Yes.
do something about me. I'm here for you. Like like your creative pursuits are, I believe they're just like this living, breathing thing. But the only way for them to grow is for you to love them, nurture them, support them, and actually
Yes.
show up and do the work.
Yeah,
Yes, I love
definitely.
that.
Yeah.
And if you don't follow your path, like you're almost doing yourself a disservice and the other people around you a disservice too. And I find that when you do start something and just starting it, not really knowing like where it's going to take you could lead to so many other greater paths that you never even would have
Yes.
discovered if you hadn't just taken those first couple steps. I have a lot of different friends that are creatives that are like, they hold themselves back and it's really frustrating because they have such great talent, and they're just not doing it, and I don't think I'm the best talent in the world. There's people that are far greater at lots of different things. But the only difference is I just keep going, and I just
Yeah.
keep doing it and making different moves. And I just want to grab my friends and be like, come on, just do
Yes.
it, stop getting in your way. Because
Yeah.
even when I got in my way, I just stepped over myself and just kept going.
Mhm.
And do you so do you feel, is that a skill that you think is inside of someone, or can you develop it? Because there are some people that I feel like they're like you, right? Like you're very, whatever, I'm going to do it. I'm going to suck it up and I'm pull myself up and do it. But a lot of people, they don't have that.
They
Is
don't.
that a skill that you've learned over time, or do you feel like that's just in some way kind of, there are certain people that just have that more than others?
I think that it goes both ways. I think it was innately inside me. I just think it was stifled. And I think I had some other things I had to break free, cut loose through some healing and spiritual stuff, not to go woo woo, that was holding me back, So I felt like I had a little bit of lost time. But like as soon as I broke free and wiggled away from some things that were holding me down, then I discovered like a whole new part to myself, And so, but I think that there's some people that are just stuck in a place where they're just they don't have the skills. I don't and they could learn them, but that maybe they just don't want to, or it's like take a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Not that old philosophy or whatever. So, but yeah, I do think that it was innately inside me. I think there
Yeah.
was a thread of strength inside of me. Why? What do you think? It's not about
I
me, it's
do.
about you.
Well, I mean, I love talking to creators, and I love talking to people like you because you're doing the work, right? Like you're
Yeah.
showing up even when it's imperfect. You're showing up even when you don't know, you don't have all the answers. And what you said is, even when you said, I'm not the best at this, but, and I immediately was like, yeah, but you're the best at it for someone else. Like for your listeners that
Yes.
listen, they're like, oh, Jozlyn's the best. Like she's
Right.
number one. And
Yeah.
that's what I think is so interesting is that we look at people, like I often will share, so like Damon John from Shark Tank, right? Like I
Oh,
love
yeah.
when he was talking about, he's like, you guys are looking at me, his audience. Like, so he was talking to his audience and he says, you guys are looking at me thinking like, I want to be more like Damon. He's like, you think that I've gotten there, right? Like, I'm like, here I am on the mountain. And he goes, but guess what I'm doing? He's like, I'm looking at someone like Richard Branson saying like, I want to be like Richard Branson. So
Right.
it's like, there are some people that I feel like we just have this desire to just like get up and keep going, keep winning. Like what, like life, there are so many incredible things in life that we can explore, that we can try, that we can do. And so for some people, they have that inside of them. And for others, I do think that you use the word stifled, and I think that a lot of people, they are stifled because over the years we get beaten down from
Yes.
people, from
Yes.
our, whether it's our family,
Yeah.
it's sometimes the people closest to us, your family and quote unquote friends,
Yeah.
that are telling you, oh, that'll never work,
Right.
you'll never be good enough. What do you mean you want to start a podcast? There's millions of podcasts. Who's going to listen to what you have to say? And all of those things happen. And if you hear that over and over, then of course you don't want to try something.
Yeah.
And that's why in the book, I talk about how we have to surround ourselves with creative friends. I call them
love
creative friends. And your creative friends are those that not only do they support you like your supporter friends, but they are also creating. They are creating. And if you have friends that are creating and they're putting things out into the world and they're doing things and they're exploring their passions, there's no way they're going to hold you back. There's no way they're going to tell you not to try something because they know the power of creating and they support that. Even if in the back of their minds, they're like, I don't know, that's like a crazy idea. They love your crazy ideas because they're like, let's see. Let's see if it works. And so we've got to surround ourselves with those people. And when you do that, then it's scary in the beginning if you're not used to stepping out of your comfort zone and you're not used to taking action and exploring some of your ideas. But when you start doing it, it's like an addiction. You can't stop doing it. You're like, oh,
Totally.
I started this podcast and I never even knew how to turn on a microphone. And now all of a sudden you have one podcast and then the next and the next, and you just keep going.
Yes.
I mean, podcasting is so interesting too, because I mean, I don't know what the stats of how many podcasts there are, but in the realm of all the millions of them, how most of them have what, like 3 or 4 episodes.
Right.
They don't go past like 6 episodes because people are like, oh, I don't want to do this every week. And where are my millions of followers on episode 3? Like,
Right. That's the thing is I didn't care. I just wanted to start it. It like literally this Keeping Up with Chaos portion of this podcast started from a girlfriend and I just in a driveway drinking, kids running up and down the street. And she's like, I think we should start a podcast. I'm like, I don't even know what a podcast is. What are you talking about? I come from radio. But then learning the soft skills of like figuring out what it takes to put together a podcast, I could do that because it was easy for me to transfer from radio. And we just started it, and then it evolved from 2 people to guests to my co-host leaving. I think you can relate to that. She left, and then I started bringing on rotating guest co-hosts, and then we started this From the Booth and Beyond with Angela and I and some other voice acting and on-camera people, and then we merged them together. And it's like, who would have thunk, but it was just, we don't care how many people are listening. We just are having fun doing it. And that's another part of passion projects is you just really have to just love it, and just all the rest of it comes along with it. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? I just enjoy
Yeah.
spending time meeting new people like you and hearing your story and spending a morning with Angela and just,
Thanks.
hanging out. So,
Yeah,
how
you've
does,
inspired me. You actually inspired me because I
oh
started listening
boy.
to yeah, because I started listening to your show and I thought, oh, this is really cool. You have guest co-hosts, which I never. So I
Yeah.
went from having a host and then he left around like episode 40 or so. But I committed when I started the podcast, I was like, okay, 100 episodes minimum. I'm doing this. Like
Right.
because I'm really good at starting. I'm a great starter at things. I don't always
Yes.
finish.
Yes. Same.
So
Same.
I was, and I see that in a lot of creatives. We love ideas,
Yes.
right? We
Yeah.
shiny object. So I started it and I'm like 100 episodes. I'm going to do 100. And so I was committed to doing it. And then around 40, he decided to not do it. I'm like, I'm going to keep doing it. So then I started bringing on more guests. And then sometimes I'll just do like a little 7-minute on my own. I'll just share some ideas. But after I started listening to yours, I was like, oh, that's a good idea. I like the
Yeah.
guest co-host idea to like
Yeah.
invite people to come on and then have another
Another
guest, like a
guest.
real guest. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I think I might explore that
You
as I
never know what's going to
continue.
happen. Then you might
Yeah.
merge a couple podcasts together and wham, you have like
Boom.
this
You never
giant
know.
party.
I mean, I always said I was going to go to episode 100 and then I was going to see how I felt. And I'm on episode 98.
Mm-hmm.
So
Ooh,
I have
nice.
2 more episodes. And honestly, because I wrote this book and then I became really fascinated over the past couple years on writing, I've been reading and studying a ton of writers. I thought, oh, I think I might kind of not turn the podcast into, but maybe kind of
Niche
veer
out.
it into
Yeah.
that journey of talking to
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
authors and
Yeah.
about the writing process.
That would be
Absolutely.
incredible because it's like sharing your story, learning about what other people's processes and journeys is like, well, that's what it's all about because you
Yeah.
learn, you're validated, you feel understood, then you're also
Mm-hmm.
learning and understanding other people's processes and journeys. And that like you might all end up at the same place, like Angela and I did, but we came from different places, on the same
Yeah.
path. So that's interesting. So let's talk a little bit more about your book because I find like the 7 myths of like what's really stopping you. You touched on like number 3, but like if you had to like touch on a couple that like would, that would be really important for creatives to just sort of zone in on. And by the way, you have 2 podcasts, don't you?
Yes.
I was gonna say, wait a second, you have 2
I do.
podcasts.
I do. Well, talk about, your creativity and more kind of work related stuff. I have a podcast called Create for No Reason.
Yep.
And it is all really around creativity, the creative process. That's really what we dive into. And then I started another podcast. So I run a coaching company. So I run an organization and we work with a lot of executives and leaders. We actually certify dream managers. So, which is really incredible. Matthew Kelly is the founder of the company and he wrote a book called The Dream Manager years ago. So we certify life coaches that go into organizations to help their team members rediscover their dreams and then help them achieve those dreams.
Very cool.
It's amazing. And so I do that. So we started a podcast called Lead with Culture because it's
That's what it was.
all
Yeah.
about culture. So our philosophy is an organization can only become the best version of itself to the extent that your people are becoming better versions of themselves, which is why I love the creative conversations because again, every single person has have creative dreams. They have dreams in all different categories. There's 12 different categories of dreams and one of them is creative. And I find that so many of our clients have lost their creative dreams. And when they are exploring that creativity, it helps them become a better leader, a better mother, a parent, a better coworker, a better team member. And so those are the 2 podcasts that I do. And it's really wonderful work. And so fortunately, I feel like my creativity and what I really am passionate about, I get to do in the role that I'm in, which is phenomenal. But that's also why I was so passionate about writing this book, right? I mean, this book is helping people to explore their passions, even if they have a full-time job. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to make it a full-time thing if you don't want to. If you do, amazing. Because the myths apply to both people, whether you're trying to do it on as a business or if you're working for someone else. Myth number 6, I see this in so many people. It was really important that I included this as one of the myths is it has to be perfect. So many of us, we stop ourselves
Mhm.
from pursuing any kind of passion project because we think that whatever we do has to be perfect. We don't start the podcast. We don't post the video. We don't share the story that we wrote. All of these things because it's not perfect.
Yeah.
And even though we know, we would all say, if we took 10 people and said, hey, do you believe perfection exists? They would all say, no, of course not. It's impossible.
Right.
Yet we still strive
Mhm,
for
mhm,
perfection.
mhm.
And so it's kind of like, how do we get into the mindset of it's okay, especially in the beginning when we start, to create mediocre work?
Yeah.
Now, we don't like that. Because who wants to be mediocre? Nobody. We want to be the
Right.
best. We want to be great. We want to be phenomenal. And so, but in the beginning, you just don't have those skills. And so
Right.
you can only do the best that you can at that time.
Mhm.
I
And
like
so
that.
one of the best ways for us to do that is the people that you follow, that you really love, that you look up to, that you're like, oh, this content is amazing. Go back and look at their first video, their
Yeah.
first podcast, their first poem, or whatever it is. It wasn't good. Well,
Mhm.
quote unquote good, right? But it was
Right.
great in
Yeah.
in the way that it was created at that time and the knowledge that they had. And there's so Ira
Love that.
Glass
Mhm.
has the most incredible way of talking about this. He calls it the taste gap. And if you Google the taste gap, Ira Glass, so he's a famous podcaster. And so if you Google the taste gap, you'll see what he talks about. And he really shares this beautiful imagery of, we have this idea of great work. Like, we have good taste because we recognize great work. So all of the people that you follow, that you really love their podcasts, their books, you follow them, you love their content, that's really good content. And you're maybe not there yet. Like, you can't create that kind of work yet. It's like, it's not at that quote unquote caliber, right?
Right.
And so, but then there's this gap in between. You know that your work isn't good enough. You know it's not kind of at the level that you want it to be because you have really good taste, but you just don't have the skills yet to create the kind of work that you know you will be able to create. But that's what stops us from creating, because we're like, oh, this isn't good enough yet. But it is good enough
Right.
exactly where you are now. And the more that you do it, this is why I love talking about the creative practice and the writing habit. Talk to any really wonderful writer and they'll tell you they write every day. Like
Mhm.
every single day they're writing. And some people have a very strict, like, I wake up at 5 and I write from 5 to 7, and they have a very strict practice. And others, it's like, well, I write, like for me, when I was writing the book, I gave myself a constraint. I had to write at least 250 words a day. And
Wow.
some days I wrote 500, 1,000 or more because I was just on a roll. And other days I just did not feel like writing, but I made myself write 250 words. And only by doing that was I able to write the book. And when I wrote the book, so much of the first draft, it was so bad. I was like, this is not a book. Like, this is not good.
Yeah.
But I had to do all of that work. I mean, for me, it was a 2-year process
Mhm.
of getting everything out on the page. And when I reread it, I was like, oh, this doesn't even make sense. And so anyway, I'm kind of rambling now,
No,
but
I love it. I love it.
I'm a big fan of that idea of the taste gap, because I think it helps people understand, oh, I do have good taste. My work isn't at the level I want it to be at yet,
Totally.
but it is good enough, and it is meant for someone else. Like, it is
Yes.
meant for the person. Like, I always look at
I love that.
people who there's some people, like, with going back to the Damon John thing, right? Like, he's looking to be Richard Branson, but his followers are looking to be more like Damon. Like, we're continuously getting better. And when you can follow people and have mentors that are just a few steps ahead of you, that seems so much more achievable
Mhm.
than if you're like, I'm trying to be Mark Cuban. And you are literally 22 years old and you're just starting a business. Like, no, you have a couple steps to go to become a billionaire Mark Cuban.
Right.
Yeah.
absolutely love that because it was one of those things like you're like, I have like chills and like check, 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 check. Everything's being checked. Like just connecting with Angela and our other group of friends that weren't able to join us this morning. That makes us a whole podcast group. Like they are my support. They are my creative support group. We all support each other in all of our endeavors. And one of our Frankie's a part of our group, and he's behind the scenes now, but he wanted to do acting, and I'm like, let's freaking do it. Let's find an online class. You're in California, I'm in Florida. We took the online acting class. I did it just to sort of get some tools to help me with like voiceover, because coming from radio, like you have to really emote your feelings to like get the words off the paper to be a voice actor, right? And I knew I needed to get those skills. I know I was good enough to put together a demo, but I knew I had to get to here to where I wanted to be. I needed to do the work, right? And so I took the acting class with him, and now I'm doing acting stuff. And I never thought I would be
Ah,
doing it, And so I put together a demo, and now I'm putting myself out there. And it's like, wow, this is cool. But you know what? I don't want to be Jennifer Aniston. I
Yeah.
just want to be doing the thing.
Yeah.
I want to
yes.
do the student films. I want to do the indie projects. Like, if I can go to an art festival and see an indie film that I might have been a part of, like, sweet. Like, of course, I want to get paid eventually. That would be nice. I don't want to keep dumping buckets of money into my business and not get anything back. But, it's like just, you know what I'm saying? Like, just doing the
Yes.
thing and enjoying it and just going for it. And you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I didn't
Yes.
set out to be in voice acting. It fell back into my life. And because it fell back into my life, it made me pause and go, huh, maybe I need to try that again. And then I did it. And that was the third time that it came in and back into my life. And it actually just kind of all connected. And just
Wow.
doing it, and
Yes.
I didn't know where it was going to take me, but here we are. And
Ah,
and that reminds me of your one episode, which brings you back to your book, is that like just get started. Just start writing, because what you just wrote might not be all the things, but like that last thing that you wrote might be the thing,
Yeah.
yes.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
I have chills. Like,
yes.
I don't want to take your
That's
words, but
no, but that's exactly what I said. It's sometimes, especially now because I'm exploring poetry a lot more. That was
yeah,
something that came out of a lot of the writing I was doing. I was like, why am I really loving poetry? In fact, my publisher said to me, you kind of have this very poetic way of writing. And I thought, what? That's so amazing. And so,
that's funny.
because the book, I mean, it's a nonfiction book, but to me, that was such a compliment because, obviously I want it to be, I want people to feel inspired when they're reading this
Yeah.
work. And so, but there were so many times when I would sit and I would write all of this stuff. And then the next morning I would go back and I'd look at it and I was like, oh my God, these first 3 paragraphs, scratch, done. I don't need them. But these last 2 lines, this is the whole chapter. Like, this is what
Totally.
needs to be said. But I never would have come up with those 2 lines had I not written all of those other words.
Yeah,
And
I
I have a whole document in Google Docs of things that I wrote that I thought, these are good ideas. They don't belong in this book. Let me put them over here. And so I'm excited to go back to those at some point because maybe there's a place for it in another book I write, or maybe in another article or video or story or whatever it is. And that's what's so fun to play around with writing or, whatever your creativity is. I mean, even your story, I mean, that's so cool that now you're exploring acting. And you know what? Sometimes I wonder about people that are in voiceover or acting or any kind of creative projects. There's so many different ways to earn a living doing it. Like, there are plenty of actors. Hey, look, there's plenty of actors that are out of work that don't make any money, but there's also plenty of actors that they do really, like, they have 6-figure businesses and they have a family and they're doing great. And they get to practice the act that they love to do. They love acting and they get to do it. And by the way, they can walk down the street and not get mauled by paparazzi and autographs. And, I think about some of the people that are on national commercials. I'm like, you do really well in a national commercial and maybe some people recognize you, but you're doing well. You're earning an income. You're earning good. You get to earn good money and do what you love. And also not have all of the other stuff that comes along with what we hear, what some of people that are very famous deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Yeah,
Definitely.
they're being creative and enjoying themselves. Which brings you
Yeah.
back to that whole work life balance. Like when you're working with creatives and you're talking about creatives, is there a myth in the seven myths like about work life balance or and that's hard to do when you have families and a day job and you're
Yeah.
creative and you've got passion projects, you know? I mean, that also can hold people back from doing the things that they want to do. If yeah. Or if there's one
Yeah.
myth that you want to touch on before we like wrap things up that you just everybody just needs to hear it, you know?
Well, myth number 5 is there's not enough time.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
But I'll go with but the last myth because it's like calling to me. It's like speaking
Yeah,
that
no,
like
I
this
like
is
that.
so it's myth number 7, inspiration will strike.
Yeah, oh,
And
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
love that one because it's so much it kind of encompasses what we've been talking about and on this show, which is
Yes.
we think that something's going to pull us off the couch. We think that something is going to, at just some point, we're going to feel like doing it. No, it just doesn't really happen that way, right? Because it's easier to sit on the couch. It's easier to not do something than it is to do something. And so that chapter, which by the way was my favorite myth, but probably the hardest chapter for me to write. I thought it was going to be I thought it was going to be the easiest chapter. And it turned out it was the hardest chapter. And I think that the reason why was because it's so, to me, I felt like it was just so important and meaningful, and it also like ends the book. And so I thought, oh, there's a lot of pressure on this chapter to
Yeah.
really show like what I'm trying to convey. And
Yeah.
I talk about muses. I talk about how some people, think there's this muse like one time like they're just gonna like come and sprinkle this fairy pixie dust and be like boom, here you are, here's all the inspiration you need and go create. But it's actually the act of creating that inspires us to create. So the act of doing it is what pushes us forward. So when I sit down and write, I am more inspired after I sit down and write. Sometimes I don't feel like it, sometimes I'm tired, sometimes I
Yeah.
just would rather go do something else. But when I am never disappointed when I actually sit down and write. I'm always happy that I did it. And I'm
Yeah.
always proud of myself for doing it because it's not always easy. But once I
Totally.
do it, I get started. And then, like I said, sometimes I keep writing and sometimes I don't. And then sometimes I write for a little bit, or maybe something around the book. And then I say, hey, I'm inspired to write a poem. And I
Yeah.
wasn't inspired before. So it's the act of creating and
I
it's
like
the
that.
act of the doing the thing that gets you moving and going, and then you'll start to see more of that inspiration and motivation to keep going. So that's something that I feel like is such a big myth, is we really do feel like, oh, I'll get to it someday. I just
Yes.
don't feel inspired yet. But I don't know, I
Just
just
do
feel
it.
that's why writers talk about the practice. There's so many really incredible books around creativity and the practice and the creative practice and writing. And that is one commonality among all of them that I've seen, is like they all have some type of practice. Twyla Tharp is a dancer, and she has a book called The Creative Habit. And her habit is she wakes up every morning and her habit is she goes and works out and she dances first thing in the morning. She gets in the cab. She has the habit of doing it.
Yes. I love
And by
that.
doing that, it's you're building that creativity muscle because you're putting yourself in a space to be creative.
I
Absolutely.
love that.
Absolutely.
That definitely speaks volumes to me because just being a voice actor, you just have to get in the booth every day. You
Hmm.
might not feel like it, but you got to get in the booth and you got to be auditioning, you got to be doing
Oh
the
yeah.
things, you know. So
Yeah.
go ahead, Angela. I was
Well, because I was gonna say, just thinking about my own creativity and the roadblocks that I found, like, I can draw, I could paint, I can do all this stuff that I haven't done in years because, I'll start a project and then I'm not like feeling it and then I'll stop it and then I never come back to it. So it's
right.
like, you slow yourself down, you get in your own way and then
Hmm.
you break that habit, and I think that's great. I really need to instill that into my own life, is just getting up and spending time with my own art or my own creativity and
Yeah.
seeing where it takes me. But it also leads me to the idea of I did listen to the Lowering Your Expectations podcast, which I thought was interesting because it's like, we all, even, you just talked about it, we all strive to be better and we all strive to be this better person. But in reality, like thinking about your own expectations, like don't get too ahead of yourself.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
find yourself where you are in a sense, you
Yeah,
know.
be kind to yourself.
I
People are
love
so
that.
mean to themselves.
Oh
Be
yeah.
kind to yourself and exactly where you are. I mean, myth number 2 is you're not good enough. You are good, and we touched on
I
that
love
today.
that.
And it's you're good enough exactly where you are today.
Right.
And
Right.
again, like going back to if your
Mhm.
only job is to show up and do the work, like so like that's less pressured. Be kind to yourself. You know,
Mhm.
so many
So
people
good, yeah.
overthink, and overthinking is one of those things that it causes us to it stifles our creativity instead of, hey, be kind to yourself and know
Yeah.
that you're enough and give yourself that permission to create whatever it is. And by the way, you don't have to create and share everything. You can create just for you and not
Mhm.
share it with anyone.
I
Right.
love that, and I'm just gonna say one thing because I talk to my son about this all the time. You drag yourself, you just drag and drag and drag. I don't want to unload the dishwasher. I'm not gonna do it. It's gonna take forever, and it gets builds in your head, builds in your head, builds in your head. I actually timed myself. I timed myself unloading the dishwasher. It took 5 minutes. So I spent all that time talking myself out of unloading the dishwasher, and it took 5 minutes. And I think you talk about that a little bit too, about setting some time aside. Just setting like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 25 minutes, right? And just sit down and do it. Get in the booth, do some auditions, or maybe sit down and write some poetry, or maybe, I don't know, watch some movies to like learn some acting skills or see what other actors are doing just for a little bit, just to,
Yeah.
and don't talk yourself out of it because it could just take 5 minutes of unloading the
Yeah.
dishwasher and then it's done.
That's it.
And that's it. You're just doing it. Just do it,
I know.
But
Why do we
I
do this? We're like, so people, the human condition is fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. But I do think there is something to be said about that, like she had mentioned about the habits, like you have to
Yeah,
have that habit of if you are going to aside, 25 minutes just to write or do your art or whatever it is, it needs to be around the same time of day kind of situation so that your body and your brain knows, okay, this is time to create,
that's true.
versus, just hopping around each day trying to figure out, okay, am I doing it at night? Am I doing it in the morning? I think that really does for me at least puts a negative spin on, oh man, if I can't get it done in the morning, I'm never going to do it.
Yeah.
So I think having that consistent habit forming um situation with your creativity, I think that's
Yeah.
super important. So I love
I'm
that
rubbing
we
off
touched
on
on
you,
that.
my
I
methodical
know.
ways.
I know. It's so true. It's so true. Some of us are wild and some of us have those methodical ways, and I mean, I think we take a little from both.
Yes.
Like I think I really could benefit from more of a habit schedule type situation. And I think you
Yes. You'd be a
could,
little more wild.
yeah, jump into it. Why not? Do it.
Well,
I
so
I
go
have
ahead,
one
yeah.
more question,
Yeah,
Kate.
yeah.
You've worked with many people and you've spoke with many people over your podcast and stuff like that. Is there something that you feel your clients or your guests have in common when it comes to being a creative?
Oh, wow, that's
What
a good
they
one.
have
I feel
in
like we all have in common the fact that sometimes we get in our own way, we have our own self
Yes.
doubt. But as far as like the positivity goes, like, do you feel like everybody has like something that was like, okay, I could see that in you, and I could see that in that person as well?
I think what I find is it kind of touches on what I've already shared, which is every single one of us is creative.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We all have creativity inside of us. And even those that I've spoken with, so some of our clients, when I work with a lot of executives, they are kind of challenged with, no, I'm not creative. Like, I don't have a
Right.
creative bone in my body. And so they have this doubt. They have this doubt in themselves that they aren't creative. And so it's almost like the people that I talk to on that side, it's very different. The people that I have on Create for No Reason, the similarity is they show up and do the work.
Yeah.
Like they don't
Interesting. Yeah.
mind. They don't mind that it's not where they want it to be yet. Like they
Uh-huh.
know that they trust the process.
Uh-huh.
They
Mhm.
trust the creative process that it's somehow going to work. It's somehow going to be worth it. Like I have on my computer, I have this little pink, note card, and it says this. It says, "It's always worth it.
Oh, I
It's
love
always
that.
worth it." And
Always worth
it's
it,
just a
always worth it.
reminder to me that whatever that creative pursuit is for you, whatever it is that you've been thinking about forever and you just haven't done, it is always worth it no matter what, because
Mhm.
it doesn't matter what the outcome is. All that matters is that you tried it. All that matters is that you gave into your creativity and that you started noticing. And what I find so fascinating about so many of the creatives that I get to talk to is very similar to your story, which is I started it and then all of a sudden I'm running this business. Or I
Yeah.
started this podcast and then all of a sudden I met this person and that and their worlds just opened up. And I always tell people we are one idea or connection away from completely changing the trajectory of our lives.
I
Like
love
every
that.
day. And if
That's right.
if you wake up every day and think that, and so that's really the commonality that I see among all of the creatives that I talk to is that we're willing to show up and do the work. We're willing to look foolish. We're willing for things to fail. We're willing to be courageous even when it's uncomfortable. We're willing to share work even when it is uncomfortable. If you would have told me a few years ago that I was going to be sharing poetry in my book and on my podcast, I'd have been like, what? I write poetry? Like, where did that come from? And
Right.
two, I'm like, oh, no way. And now I'm just and I took a poetry workshop last weekend and I'm just really exploring that side of me.
That's
Because
awesome.
why? Simply because I find it interesting. I am not in any way trying to earn a living being a poet. I'm not interested in doing that, but I am interested in reading more great poetry and learning from others that are doing it and exploring my own creativity on that side. And so I think let people give themselves permission to explore what interests you. And when you start exploring what interests you, be very open to noticing what else. Like, what other things are you finding fascinating? Explore what you find fascinating, and you're going to have a more fulfilling life.
I love that.
I love it. Thank
love
you.
it.
Thank you.
It's always worth it. I love that.
Always
I
worth
love
it.
that. So if anybody wants to connect with you and listen to the several podcasts that you have, the 2 podcasts, you also have a newsletter that you put out that I was inspiring too. Like that's hard work, man. I mean,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
right? I mean, that's a whole other thing. So
That's a
how can
whole
they
other
find you?
thing.
How can our listeners connect with you?
So the easiest way to connect with me is just going to my website, katevolman.com. It has
Yep.
all my social channels there. You can sign up for my newsletter. My newsletter is called Massive Optimism.
Yeah, I love
And
that.
my podcast is called Create for No Reason. And yes, the newsletter is interesting because it is challenging to put something out every week, but goes back to the
Yes.
practice. Hey, I
Yeah.
have to put something out every week, so I got to do it.
Right. I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your morning with us today. And
Yes,
thank you,
thank you.
Angela.
Yeah, of
And it
course.
was so nice to finally connect with you. So
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And keep doing work, keep creating, keep doing your great work and inspiring your audience and the people that you serve, because you have really fun conversations and you bring on interesting people. So I appreciate anyone that's putting things out into the world to inspire others to pursue their dreams. So thank you for your work.
yeah,
Awesome.
thank you. Hang
Thanks,
on one
Kate.
second.